Hi, I'm Jim Camposano, editor of Muscle Mustangs and Fast Fords magazine. Today we're here to talk about two of our favorite subjects, 5-liter Mustangs and heads-up drag racing.
Muscle Mustangs and Fast Fords magazine presents Heads Up, drag racing your Mustang to win.
Heads up drag racing is the best. You gotta catch it and do it. I love leaving on a pro tree.
The guy who wins, wins. First one to the end of the track's the winner. Bottom line.
Back in the golden age of drag racing, men and their machines battled it out at drag strips across the country to find out who had the quickest cars and the best driving skill. But as technology and drag racing progressed, handicap, what became known as bracket racing, became popular. While bracket racing is the predominant form of drag racing today, many of us recognize that sportsman-level handicap racing lacks a lot of the same excitement and thrills that you get from heads-up racing. During the mid to late 80s, something great happened. Mustangs, Grand Nationals, Camaros, and other late-model performance cars started showing up at drag strips around the country in record numbers. But they didn't want the same old bracket racing stuff. They wanted to do things their way, the heads-up way. No handicaps, no fancy delay boxes or throttle stops, just power, nerves, and skill. When you think of heads-up Mustang drag racing, you probably think of guys like Gene Deputy, Nitrous Pete Misinsky, Craig Radovich, or Jimmy LaRocca. They've popularized heads-up drag racing for the 5-liter enthusiast with their incredible driving skills, their low ETs, and their high speeds. But you don't need a car as wild as theirs to be competitive in heads-up racing. As you'll see, there are many classes open to the heads-up racers that range from completely stock to highly modified. In most cases, you'll only run against cars modified similar to yours. We're going to show you how to race heads-up and win. When we're finished, you know how to race, where to race, and how to prepare yourself and your car. Then we're going to hear the tips from the pros that win.
Well, I don't like bracket racing basically personally because the car doesn't win the race. It either is computers, reaction time, good brakes. You know, I've always grown up as racing is to see who has the fastest.
Heads-up racing's all out. Run it as fast as you can.
Bracket racing is boring and monotonous, and it just goes on and on and on.
I want to see who's got the fastest, the quickest car in the country. That's why I prefer heads-up pro tree, just like the big boys.
Heads-up racing is basic. Two cars leave simultaneously, and the first one to arrive at the finish line without fouling wins. As simple as it sounds, sanctioned heads-up racing on a sportsman or amateur level has not always been popular. Thankfully, there are several organizations dedicated to the grassroots heads-up movement that offer racing on a national or regional level. Within these organizations are various classes designed to accommodate different levels of modification and performance. Race organizers and sanctioning bodies have spent much time developing class rules that are fair for all competitors. As such, there is parity between cars without the necessity for dial-ins or handicaps. As in most forms of racing, whether you win or lose will largely be determined by your skill as a driver and tuner. One key to being successful is knowing the different class rules pertaining to any applicable modifications. Try to pick a class that you'll be competitive in and that you can afford to sustain. While you may want to make modifications to your car to be competitive in a quicker class, sometimes it is worthwhile to perform no modification or to remove modifications to be legal for a slower class. Often, a slower class has the advantage of less mechanical breakage or a greater parity between competitors. In any event, a careful examination of the rules should be made before planning any modifications. If in doubt, call the sanctioning body for clarification. Currently, there are 3 organizations dedicated to the promotion of heads-up racing: the National Muscle Car Association, or NMCA, the American Mustang Racing Association, or AMRA, and American Auto Sports Productions, the promoters of Fun Ford weekends. All 3 organizations have various heads-up classes that cater to all levels of competition, from 13-second street cars to 10-second race cars. Additionally, some of the classes in each organization offer championship points series for the regular participant. Among the benefits of repeat participation are recognition among fellow racers and spectators, a sense of comradeship between competitors, and additional compensation for successful and consistent performance. In addition to sanctioning bodies, many tracks have mark-specific events with heads-up racing, such as Englishtown's yearly Mustang Grand National Team Challenge. Other tracks have streetcar shootouts or heads-up Quick 8 fields as weekly or monthly programs. Many of these local heads-up eliminators are run during tune and test sessions, sometimes known as grudge nights. Wherever you look, heads-up racing is making a comeback.
The scariest moment I've ever had was down at ACO one night when I was testing. Broke the right side axle in the car. The car took a really violent turn to the right. I'm real glad I had the C-clip eliminators in the car, otherwise the axle would have walked right out of the car.
Going down the track at what I thought would be a good pass and hit 3rd gear, top of 3rd gear. Car went sideways, got out of the groove, and almost hit the wall. Let out of it, and at that point, that was probably when I realized having a roll bar and all the right safety equipment was a good idea.
July 10th, 1994, Norwalk, Ohio, racing the Fun Ford Street 5.0 shootout. First round we went up and actually dragged a back bumper. Wasn't expecting to do that, and kind of scared me. I thought I broke an axle when it snapped when I heard the back bumper dragging. That really terrified me there, but you know, we got fire jackets and roll bars and helmets and safety loops. I wasn't really worried about it. We were more worried about the tearing the car up, not necessarily hurting myself. But
I have got in some really bad shape before in a couple of cars. This one here at, say, 160, 70 miles an hour. And the only thing I thought about is my safety equipment was in the car at the time, and I knew the things would protect me. And I look at that, and of course the Lord up above to protect me, but I believe in safety equipment.
Before you race, you'll want to make sure your Mustang is in compliance with track and sanctioning body safety rules. While winning is important, your safety should be the primary concern above all else. The safety requirement imposed on your car will depend on 2 things: the sanctioning body enforcing the requirement and the performance capability of your car. For our purposes, we'll use the NHRA Safety Code, the most prevalent in the industry. Some tracks or states may impose additional rules that are not covered by this video. These guidelines should only serve as a primer and are not intended to be a complete summary of all safety regulations. A complete safety guide may be found under General Regulations in the NHRA or IHRA rulebook. For starters, you'll need a good helmet. Most tracks require one with at least a protection rating of Snell 80. When shopping for a helmet, this rating may be found on a sticker either inside the helmet or on the exterior shell. All competition cars must also have a drive shaft safety loop in the vicinity of the front universal joint. In addition to wearing an approved helmet, all drivers are required to wear shoes, shirt, and long pants during competition. These are the minimum requirements for entry-level competition. Cars running $11.99 or quicker in the quarter mile will need additional safety equipment. An approved 6-point roll bar, 5-point safety harness, and fire retardant jacket are required in all stick-shift and automatic transmission cars. Stick-shift cars will also require an approved blow-proof bell housing and billet steel flywheel. Although it is not required, Rear axle retention devices, also known as C-clip eliminators, are recommended for 11-second cars. Cars running 1099 and quicker in the quarter mile require C-clip eliminators and must replace the stock cast iron harmonic balancer with an aftermarket harmonic balancer meeting SFI Spec 18-1. In all cases, if aftermarket wheels are used, the lug studs must protrude into the hex portion of the lug nuts by an amount no less than the width of the lug stud. In many cases, this requires the use of longer aftermarket lug studs. Chances are, most of your racing will be done at one or two local tracks. Your local tech inspector will be more than happy to advise you on safety requirements. As you become a repeat customer, it will benefit you to cooperate with track officials, especially regarding safety. After all, it's your neck on the line.
Sometimes you forget to take some very important stuff to the track with you, like sometimes your water bottle, cool your car down between rounds, or maybe some of your important wrenches you take off and leave. But usually there's nice people at the track, you can always borrow stuff, but it is inconvenient. But it's much better if you have a list or some way to make sure that you take everything. Right now I've got big boxes and I keep everything in my boxes, and you know, therefore I don't forget anything. I just grab a box and go, and I know I've got everything with me.
Probably the most important thing that I've ever forgot was my helmet. I probably did that about 2 or 3 times.
The most important thing you got to bring to the track, I feel, is a toolbox. You never bring everything you need, but what I do is I have a separate toolbox that I bring just to the track. Matter of fact, on a Friday night, it was about 6:30, and we're about 45 minutes away from Englishtown, and we decided that we're going to go racing that night. So we threw everything together. I didn't even bring a toolbox that time. My first run, I happened to blow a blower belt off my blower. The belt was on the track somewhere. I didn't have a spare belt. I finally found a belt. I didn't have tools to put it on, then I had to borrow tools. It turned out to be a real hassle, and I swore I'd never rush again.
I'm sure I've forgotten everything, from forgetting to bring money, forgetting tire pressure. I've forgotten fuel. Christ, I almost forgot the car once.
If you're going to race, it will take some advanced planning. Depending on your class or performance level, you'll want to take certain items with you to the track. Besides your safety equipment, you may want to take a pair of slicks for extra starting line traction. You'll notice a major improvement in ET over radial tires, especially after you practice using them a few times. Naturally, a change of tires will necessitate that you bring a hydraulic jack, a tire lug wrench, a tire pressure gauge, and an air supply. These items will make life a lot easier for you at the track. Besides, nobody likes a mooch. While we're on the topic of mooching, remember to take along a bottle of white shoe polish for riding class designations and car numbers on your windshield. A carefully stocked toolbox should also be a part of your drag strip routine. Nothing fancy is needed, just a few key items. You should include obvious items like a selection of screwdrivers, wrenches, ratchet wrench, extensions, and drive sockets, and key spare parts like spark plugs and fan belts. An accurate inductive timing light, distributor wrench, and digital voltmeter will come in handy for problem diagnosis and power tuning. To help cool your engine and radiator between sessions, a pressurized water sprayer or cooler filled with ice should be included. These will appreciably improve the power of your engine when used properly. Cars that may benefit from higher octane fuel and more ignition timing may need high octane fuel, fuel containers, siphon pump, and funnel. This equipment allows a racer to remove the relatively low octane pump gas from his tank at the track and temporarily store it in a container. At the track, high-octane race fuel is substituted before racing. An improvement in ET will result when used in combination with increased ignition timing and possibly more fuel pressure. Rounding out your arsenal should be a pair of jack stands, a coat or windbreaker for weather changes, a bottle of sunscreen, extra containers of oil and coolant, and some towels or shop rags. A helping hand at the track can also make things go smoother. If possible, take an interested friend with you to help out at the track. You'll have a better time at the track with someone to talk to or to help with the chores. Sometimes a watchful eye from the sideline can help diagnose problems in the burn box and during the race. Two heads are always better than one.
most important thing I think that you're really tweaking is you're trying to adjust your fuel pressure to get the car to run the best it can. Fuel pressure, timing, timing you really don't touch that much. Fuel pressure, I think, is the most important thing that everybody's always playing with.
Experiment, always keep a log right on the back of your time slips if you don't have a log book. And just, as soon as you make a pass, write everything down that you just did, what you left at, what you shifted at, the temperature, how you felt the car hooked, whether it hooked or whether it spun, write it all down, and then the next time you go to the track, try to duplicate it, then make progress or regress.
After paying your entry fee, signing the track's liability waiver, passing tech inspection, and finding a suitable pit spot, you'll begin preparing the car to race. If you're fortunate enough to have a trailer and tow vehicle, most of your car preparation will have occurred before leaving home. Most beginners, however, will perform the bulk of their preparation in the pit area of the drag strip. Time is crucial during preparation. Most importantly, you'll want to allow the maximum time possible for engine cooling, particularly if the drive to the track was lengthy. If possible, try to arrive early so you'll have enough time to go through tech inspection, prepare your car, and get in ample time trials before competition. Open the hood and make any necessary changes to ignition timing and fuel pressure first. Tuning changes that require the engine running should be made first in order to allow maximum engine cooling time. With the hood open, spray the radiator down with cool water. It also helps to cover the intake manifold with wet towels or sandwich bags filled with ice. These should be removed prior to racing. The cool intake charge that results from a thorough manifold cooling will substantially lower intake charge temperature and improve performance. Make sure that you keep water overspray and puddling to a minimum. Excessive water can drop on the starting line and down the track, causing wheel spin and poor performance. While the engine cools, it's a good time to change tires if you have them. Use an accurate tire pressure gauge to measure tire pressure. For slicks, this should range anywhere between 8 and 20 psi depending on the tire type, driver experience, and power level of the car. Less experienced drivers should start with more air pressure and gradually go down until performance stops improving. When using lower air pressure in slicks, especially if it's your first time doing so, be prepared for increasing vehicle instability at speed. Try not to overcorrect for any rear swaying motion with steering input. This back and forth motion is normal. More advanced racers may equip their cars with adjustable inflatable airbags inside the rear coil springs. These may be inflated or deflated independently to improve launch traction and vehicle stability. In some cases, only one airbag is installed on the right side rear. The object of an adjustable airbag is to transfer more weight to the left side of the car prior to launch. This compensates for the vehicle's tendency to lean to the right during launch. Thus, starting line traction is maximized and driveline shock is distributed more evenly between rear tires. Rear airbags can also perform load leveling duty. This comes in handy when lots of equipment is loaded in the rear for the drive to and from the track. Supercharged, turbocharged, nitrous, and high compression 5 liters will be able to take advantage of the benefits of high-octane race fuel. Depending on the individual vehicle's need for octane, racers may either elect to mix pump fuel with race fuel or use it in 100% concentration. If straight race fuel is used, you'll need to siphon any residual pump gas from the tank before adding the race gas. In this situation, it's recommended that you arrive at the track with minimal fuel on board. Once preparations are made and your lane call is announced, it may help to push rather than drive your car to the staging lanes. This prevents the engine from heating up and is typically worth an extra 5 to 10 horsepower at the starting line. If time permits, go to the starting line and check the racing surface with your foot or your hand. Try to determine before racing how well the track officials have prepared the racing surface. As surface traction can change dramatically from week to week, don't assume that the grip is the same as the last time you raced. When checking the track, always coordinate with track officials when gaining access to the starting line. As you frequent the racetrack more often, you'll want to develop a routine to speed your preparation. As you become more familiar with this routine, the consistency and performance of your car will improve, as will your confidence as a driver and tuner. Slight changes you make in preparation will be observed on the track as you fine-tune your car. Typical pit side changes between runs include tire pressure, rear suspension, ignition timing, and fuel pressure.
Yeah, first time I came to the track, I was real nervous, and I had about 50 million things going on in my head, worrying about staging the car and worrying about everything else except driving the car. Just concentrate on driving the car, especially if you're a beginner. The guys at the track will show you how to stage the car. Usually don't have to worry about that.
First of all, you got to try to relax. Definitely, you got to relax before you go out. You can't because you're nervous. You want to do what you got to do. What I tell my people who want to learn this, and what I do is I just, like I said, I do a tunnel vision thing. I try to block everything out. If you come up to me and see me at the starting line, or some people will come to me and talk to me at the track, I sometimes don't even hear them. I just get up there and I call it a tunnel vision because I just look straight ahead and stare and just think about what I'm going to do.
Actually, the first time was pretty good because I went there and I watched people. And I didn't want to be like other people and go out there and go through the lights and stage with the back tires, things like that. I just watched for a little bit, and that's the best advice I can give. Go and watch people do it. It's hard to watch people on NHRA today, things like that, because they're a little different racing than we are. They do it different. Go local drag strip and, watch for a couple weeks and get down how to do it, go into pits and go in a staging lane and see how they do it, and then work off them, and then you fine-tune it for yourself.
Okay, right before a race, when I'm in the staging lanes about to go, I'm very nervous. I mean, you have butterflies in the stomach, and you're always going through your head of what you have to do, and you're always afraid you're going to forget to do something, like forget to set your line lock, different things like that, but it seems to go away once you get into the water. Once you start your burnout, everything seems to go much smoother.
Your mental outlook and concentration will greatly affect your success at the drag strip. Races are won and lost by hundredths or thousandths of a second, so anything you can do to mentally prepare yourself will help. Some drivers do this by shutting out all distractions not immediately related to racing. Others prefer to ease the tension by talking to other drivers in the staging lanes. In either case, it helps to complete all car preparation early so that you have time to relax and prepare mentally. While waiting in the staging lanes, go through the race in your head from burnout to shutdown. If you've got a manual transmission or plan to power shift, rehearse clutch, throttle, and shift motions with the engine off. At this time, adjust your seating position to a comfortable yet upright and alert position. Conduct a mental checklist of your car preparation to ensure you've done everything you planned. Any changes you've made to your state of tune between runs may affect the performance of your Mustang. For instance, a change in ignition-based timing may provide more starting line torque. In your mental rehearsal and during your race, you may want to elevate or reduce your launch or shift points to accommodate this change. In the moments before your race, you'll want to remind yourself of any tuning changes.
The biggest mistake I see in burnouts is people do not know about their tires that they have. Different tires require a different burnout, and a lot of people don't know that. And just like I have people say, well, you don't hardly do a burnout in your car with the Goodyears. Goodyear doesn't require a heavy burnout. It just requires a hazing. An M&H tire, you burn it. I mean, you get it to where it builds a bunch of smoke.
When you burn out in the water, you're throwing water up into the tire well, and then it doesn't matter how long you do, as soon as you get up to the staging lane, all the water is dripping down on the tires.
I do not like dry hops at all. First place is, what you just heated the tire up for, you ruined it when you made your dry hop. So dry hops are for the crowd, not for racing.
The purpose of a burnout is to increase the temperature of a racing tire to the point where it has the most tack or stickiness. Depending on the brand and compound designation, slicks will need different amounts of heat to produce maximum stick. The extra grip of the tire on the track allows the driver to apply a greater amount of power and accelerate down the track quicker. Since nearly all Mustangs are capable of providing an excess of power to any radial tire, it is highly recommended that a pair of slicks be one of your first modifications. If you insist on running radial tires, clean them briefly while rolling forward. but do not take them through the water or do a burnout. For radial tires, a slightly higher tire pressure will increase the contact patch area and provide increased traction. A burnout will not improve traction for radial tires, but will damage them instead. Slicks must be used properly in order to gain the most benefit from them. Some manufacturers formulate their rubber compound to require either longer or shorter burnouts. The length of your burnout is critical and can only be found through experimentation. Too short a burnout will result in insufficient traction, while too long a burnout overheats the tires, making them greasy and slippery. You should avoid doing dry hops once your burnout is complete. Because much of the tire's tack is lost during launch, your first launch will always be your best launch. Additionally, the burn box and the treated portion of the race surface will have different amounts of grip, so a dry hop in the burn box will give the driver a poor indication of actual starting line traction. If you have a car without roll control, use the foot brake to remain stationary during the burnout. This is called power braking. First, wet the tires and pull the car just past the water puddle. Do not start your burnout in the water, as this throws water into the wheel wells that drips back onto the tires later on. With the clutch in, select the appropriate gear. If rear gearing is 3.55 to 1 or numerically higher, select second gear. If your ratio is less, select first gear. Bring engine RPM up to a point that is sufficient to sustain the burnout. Release the clutch quickly and transfer your left foot immediately to the brake, applying light pressure. As the burnout progresses, it may be necessary to apply more throttle as the tack comes up on the tires. Do not over-rev the engine. Frequently, Mustangs with worn differentials will only do a one-tire burnout. Obviously, this is not the way to achieve maximum traction, as only one tire is being heated. Sometimes it is possible to successfully redo a burnout, but the only effective permanent solution if the problem is ongoing is to repair the rear end. If you suspect you're doing one-tire burnouts, have a friend watch for you next time. Throughout the burnout process, you will be directed by track officials. It is imperative that you follow all instructions in the burn box and staging area for safety reasons. At some tracks, officials may also assist you during your burnout with hand signals such as where to stop and when to begin your burnout. As you come to the track more frequently, you will learn what is expected of you. Mustangs with automatic transmissions and no roll control may also do a power brake burnout. Select low gear on the shifter after wetting your tires in the water puddle. Momentarily release the foot brake, jab the throttle sharply to start the tires spinning, and quickly reapply light brake pressure. Automatic and stick cars should gradually release the foot brake after tack come up on the tires. As the car rolls forward slowly, the tires will grab authoritatively as they meet dry pavement. You are now ready to stage. Drag strips come in two lengths, 1/8 mile and 1/4 mile. Other than their length, all drag strips are set up identically. Photo sensors at the starting line, 60 feet out, and at the finish line are wired to an electronic timing system for accurate measurements of elapsed time. Additional sensors are wired to measure trap speed, intermediate speed, and intermediate ET. Each race is initiated by a starting line official by means of an electronic switch. When the switch is thrown, the timing sequence begins and the lights come down the Christmas tree, so named for its amber, green, and red bulbs. Staging is the act of placing the front tires so that they interrupt the light beams at the starting line. There are two beams, pre-staged and staged. The starter will only throw the switch to initiate the starting sequence once both cars have completely interrupted their respective stage beams. The stage and pre-stage beams are 8 inches apart. This means that there is a considerable amount of leeway in positioning your car for a race. How far you go into the stage beam is called rollout. In some cases, you'll want to break the stage beam minimally, called shallow staging, and in some cases, you may even want to roll completely out of the pre-stage beam, called deep staging. How deep you go into the lights can affect your performance greatly, changing your ET, trap speed, and reaction time substantially. Later, We'll discuss the benefits of each. Depending on the format of the event, you will either receive a 5/10 sportsman starting sequence, sometimes known as a full tree, or either a 4/10 pro sequence. As you will see, these are significantly different and will affect how you race on each. A 5/10 tree will energize each of 3 vertical amber lights sequentially, followed by a green light. There is a half-second delay between each light, hence the designation 5/10. Like a traffic light, a green light signals go, specifically when a car's front tire may leave the staging beam without fouling or red lighting. If a car leaves the stage beam before the green, a red light will energize, signaling the disqualification. The 4/10 Pro Tree, the primary signal used in heads-up racing, illuminates all 3 amber lights simultaneously for a period of 4/10 of a second, hence the name 4/10. A green light immediately follows. The cadence of this light is much quicker, and as you will find, requires some practice at to become proficient. For both types of trees, the measure of time between green light and when the tires actually break the stage beam is called reaction time. Even though the ET timers do not start until you leave the stage beam, valuable time may be lost to an opponent who has a shorter reaction time. Remember, the quickest car doesn't always win. The one who gets there first does. Many races are won by slower cars that leave the starting line first. For example, it's possible for a car that runs an elapsed time of 12 flat to beat a car that goes 11.9 by having a reaction time at least a 1/10 of a second better. Beginners soon find out that by waiting for the green light to illuminate, they often lose. Experienced racers know to leave before the light turns green. The reason they do not foul is that the car takes a relatively long time to move forward from the time of physical input, usually between 2 and 3/10 of a second for most 5 liters. When racing on a 5/10 sportsman tree, you'll isolate your concentration on the last amber bulb and react to it. If fouling or red lighting becomes a problem, less rollout or shallow staging will be necessary. In either case, a little experimentation will yield excellent results. The 4/10 Pro Tree is a little more difficult to master. As this is the prevalent light in heads-up racing, you'll want to get some seat time in front of it before racing on it. Like the sportsman tree, you react to the amber light, not to the green light. The difference is, you do not have to isolate your concentration on the bottom bulb in particular. With the Pro Tree, you should focus all your concentration on one of the unlit amber lights. If you have lane choice, it helps to pick a lane that allows you to look away from direct sunlight. This will improve your reaction time and possibly increase your opponent's. In cases where starting line traction seems to be fairly even between lanes, put the sun out of your immediate field of vision.
The best way to cut a good light, generally on a Pro Tree, is the deep stage. If you know you're going to get killed, or if the other guy has got you by a couple tenths, go up there deep stage and try to make up the advantage on the tree.
When I'm racing heads up, if I'm qualifying, I'd rather do a shallow stage. This way I can get the best ET possible. The reason for that is because you'll have more rollout of the car before it breaks the beam and makes the clock actually start. When I'm racing in eliminations, I rather deep stage the car as much as I can to get the better reaction time, to get the jump as much as I can.
On a Pro Tree, if you can cut anywhere in the low 500s shallow stage, you're doing good, and anything in the 4s deep stage, you're doing fine.
As soon as I do my burnout, it's a race to the tree. I try to beat the guy to the tree. They're usually holding me back, you know, because I want to get to the box, and I don't want to do a bad burnout. I'll do a good burnout, but I'm speeding up the whole scenario. I'll just get in there, boop, turn him over, wet him, do a good burnout, take to the line, and get all set up. I'm going to beat him to the tree. If I can beat him to the tree, I'm probably going to beat him out of the tree.
Now that you know what staging is, let's talk about how you can use it to your advantage to win a heads-up race, even when faced with a quicker opponent. Since most heads-up 5-liter events employ a Pro Tree, we'll focus on this. As we said before, concentration is vital if you're going to be successful at heads-up racing. In the moments immediately preceding launch, you must put yourself in the zone, much like a professional athlete does during a big game. Without concentration, all the other tips will be useless. Concentration, however, is only part of the picture. As we said earlier, there is 8 inches distance between the pre-stage and stage beam. Due to the position of the beams above the ground and the round shape of the tire, there is actually 11 inches of rollout available to a Mustang with a 26-inch tall front tire. Whenever the lowest elapsed time is desired, such as in qualifying, you'll want to use this to your advantage. Because the clock doesn't start until you break the staging beam, you should use this 11 inches as a head start on the timers. In the best cases, this can translate into over 1/10 of a second in ET reduction. In qualifying, where ET counts more than the win light, you may be able to grab a higher spot on the elimination ladder. In a sportsman ladder 8-car field, the difference between qualifying 4th and 5th will mean the difference between racing the slowest or the fastest car in the first round. Since purses are often paid out through first round winner in an 8-car field, staging shallow during qualifying can mean money in your pocket. You may leave the line at your own discretion during qualifying to gain an advantage. This can keep opponents guessing about your ability to cut a good reaction time. Also, by leaving when you're ready and not when the light changes, you'll be able to put your engine RPM exactly where you want for maximum performance. By staging shallow and leaving late, you're running against the clock and not the other lane. Pro tree eliminations are quite different from qualifying attempts. Here, the only objective is to get to the finish line first. Presently, AMRA, NMCA, and Fun Ford weekend events allow deep staging in all heads-up classes. Let's explain how you can turn this into a major advantage. Because most racers at heads-up events normally race on a 5/10 sportsman tree, they are not as familiar with the pro tree. Typically, when staging deep into a 5/10 sportsman tree, a red light foul will result unless the car or driver is very slow to react. This being the case, most drivers are extremely reluctant to deep stage on any tree, including a pro tree. In actuality, it is very difficult to red light on a pro tree because it's only 4/10 of a second in length. In fact, most 5-liter Mustangs take such a relatively long time to physically react to control input that it is practically impossible to foul against a deep-staged pro tree. By practicing the deep stage on a 4/10 pro tree, you'll be able to consistently score reaction times in the low 500s or even in the 400s. This normally results in a huge starting line advantage, or hole shot. The deeper you stage, the lower the reaction time and the greater your hole shot. After some experimentation, you will learn how deep you can stage without fouling. Generally, slower cars can stage deeper than faster cars. This is because a slower car takes longer to react to physical input than a faster car. While your ET and trap speed may not improve by deep staging, you'll find yourself at the finish line before your opponent much more often. Stick cars should pay attention to clutch pedal travel and clutch engagement when launching. Reaction times are often needlessly lengthened by racers who push the clutch all the way to the floor. Find the point in clutch travel where the clutch just begins to grab. When staging and before launching, position the clutch pedal just below the point of engagement to decrease your reaction time. When you stage can also have an important bearing on who wins during eliminations. For a variety of reasons, it is more advantageous to stage first in heads-up 5-liter competition. This goes against the age-old idea that it is better to stage last. The wisdom of this argument is that you can wait until your mental concentration hits a peak and then stage for a better reaction time. In the pro ranks, such as Pro Stock or Pro Mod, where staging last is desirable, the tree comes down quick. In most cases, the last car to stage still has physical momentum going into the light and can turn that roll-through into a head start advantage. In point of fact, this battle of wits in the 5-liter ranks is won more often by the starting line official who has the final say over when the tree actually comes down. Starting line burn downs and quick trees often result when psychological staging games are played by sportsman-level heads-up racers. These terms refer to particularly long or short starting delays on the part of the starting official and serve as gentle reminders of who actually flips the starting switch. By staging first, you have more time to precisely control your rollout, clutch pedal travel, and engine RPM without fear of taking the light prematurely. By staging last, you're at the mercy of the starter and may be caught unaware in the event of a quick tree. Unlike pro-class national events that use a small but consistent pool of starters, there will be little consistency between starter personnel at the 5-liter heads-up level. Those who stage last in an attempt to gain a pro-style advantage are frequently burnt by the starter.
Power shifting can gain you 2 to 3 tenths. I've seen guys with actually less horsepower but power shift outrun a car that had more power because the other guy basically granny shift.
I believe that with a Tremec or a T5 that you have to accept the driveline problems, but if you power shift properly, the transmission will last. Ed Smith has been racing with the same transmission for 4 years.
Dude, I broke 4 T5s in one day. One day.
Holy Moses.
4 T5s. I'd put a T5 in my car with a button clutch. I'd go on a street with street tires, pop second gear, and bust a case in half. Everything was right. It's just, I put a clutch in that did not give at all. And that the same day we ended up putting 4 transmissions, brand new in my car. I then went to an automatic.
But if you're in a heads-up race, you have to live with sacrifices, and breakage is part of that sacrifice, because when you come out here to win. And if you're going to granny shift it or shift it slowly, the guy next to you is not, so you're going to lose.
During normal motoring, stick shift drivers modulate throttle pressure and clutch action during shifting to produce a smooth, low-impact transition between gears. In drag race competition, some stick shift drivers prefer to use an alternate technique of gear selection called power shifting. In comparison to the normal or flat shift method, the power shift has the capacity to significantly reduce elapsed time in the quarter mile by anywhere between 2 and 5/10 of a second. Power shifting differs from flat shifting primarily in that the throttle is not modulated or feathered during the shift. Instead of reducing the throttle to keep engine RPM steady as in flat shifting, the throttle is held to the floor throughout the shift. Because of the potential for damaging engine overspeed, the duration of the shift is reduced substantially. The reduction in ET is largely a function of 2 factors. When compared to flat shifting, a power-shifted Mustang is under power from the engine a greater percentage of the total race. For example, a flat-shifted Mustang that runs the quarter mile in 13 seconds may spend only 12.3 seconds under power. The other 0.7 seconds are spent coasting between gears. The same car, when power-shifted, should easily go 2 or 3/10 quicker. Another factor is stored flywheel energy. Even though a power shift is quicker than a flat shift, it is not instantaneous. In the time span that the clutch is disengaged during a power shift, the engine is allowed to rev upward freely for a short time. As the engine does this, the flywheel stores an increasing amount of rotational energy. During clutch engagement, this extra flywheel inertia is dumped into the drivetrain as an extra power spike added to normal engine output. In essence, the flywheel is like a rechargeable battery. It charges up when you push the clutch in and discharges to the rear tires when the clutch is re-engaged. As you might imagine, this puts an incredible strain on driveline components. Mustang clutches, flywheels, transmissions, drive shafts, axles, and differentials have all failed under the strains of power shifting, so the decision to do so should not be made lightly. In particular, the late model T5 transmission is known to have a high likelihood of failure when power shifted on an ongoing basis. If you decide to power shift, you may want to consider upgrading your transmission, flywheel, and clutch. Many racers upgrade to the Ford Motorsport World Class T5 or the super strong Tremec 5-speed. These transmissions, particularly the Tremec, have a high resistance to the punishment of power shifting. Power shifted cars with higher output should also consider a billet steel flywheel and heavy-duty clutch for durability and safety. It is possible to practice your power shifting technique with the infliction of minimal strain to your drivetrain. Instead of opening the throttle all the way, hold the gas down partway during a practice shift. At first, try power shifting at a lower engine RPM and gradually increase throttle position and engine RPM as your proficiency increases. During your practice, try to minimize the amount of engine overspeed and attempt to reduce the total time of the power shift. Doing these things will provide the most ET benefit and the least amount of abuse to your Mustang. As you improve, you'll get a feel for what your transmission can and can't do. By starting out with modest shift points and modest throttle position, you should successfully avoid any transmission damage. If there are any problems with the gearbox or the clutch, you will find them before you put a major strain on them. If shifts are difficult to complete or are accompanied by strange noise, have the transmission repaired before continuing. Never power shift fifth gear or overdrive in any manual transmission. This gear is weak and will break just about every time. Even under the best scenario, power shifting will eventually and unavoidably result in damage to the stock drivetrain, in all probability the transmission. You must weigh the substantial ET benefit with the cost of breakage. If the goal is to win in competition, then you will need to power shift in most cases. If you decide to learn the art of power shifting, try to keep gratuitous power shifts to a minimum. Save them for the track. While automatic transmission 5 liters cannot benefit from power shifting, their Ford automatic overdrive transmissions can be improved with the installation of a shift kit. This will reduce the unneeded expenditure of time and power while shifting. Automatic overdrive, or simply AOD transmissions, have a 1D-OD shift pattern. Unlike most automatic transmissions, they cannot be directly shifted from second to third gear. Because the AOD's factory pre-programmed 2-3 shift RPM may not be advantageous to drag racing, it may be desirable to manually shift from second to third. This can be done by forcing the 2-3 shift. Launch the car with the transmission in drive, or D. The first to second gear change will occur automatically, and in most cars will happen at an acceptably high engine RPM. While a manual 1-2 shift is possible, increased band wear will result, so try to shift automatically from low to second. Once the transmission shifts automatically into second, immediately pull the shift lever back into 1 or low gear. The transmission will stay in second gear as designed. Unless the car slows to a predetermined speed, the car will not shift back into first. As you accelerate in second gear with the lever in the 1 position, keep track of engine RPM on the tachometer. When third gear is desired or a little before, push the shift lever into D or drive to obtain third gear. This should easily take you to the finish line. With the AOD transmission, never shift into overdrive or OD under full throttle, or transmission damage can result.
As you might have guessed, the 5-liter Mustang has a lot of performance to offer the drag racing enthusiast. By using this video, you should be able to get the most performance from your Mustang. In fact, don't be surprised if you find yourself going quicker than you ever have before without spending a single cent. Hopefully, those of you who are new to drag racing will join the club and meet us at a track near you. If you've been racing for a while, you could still knock off some time from your ET by using the tips on this video and watching more experienced racers. Drivers across the country have jumped on the 5-liter bandwagon and made it a staple of heads-up, sportsman-level drag racing. If you're interested in learning more about when and where to race your 5-liter Mustang, give one of the previously mentioned organizations a call. As growing entities, they're going to appreciate hearing from you, the future of their sport. Many track owners only make the foray into heads-up sportsman racing once a local group approaches them. This approach has been successful in many cities, especially in areas where street racing has been a problem. Remember, no track owner wants street racing in his town. Regardless whether you're going 14s, 13s, 11s, or faster, there's something for everyone who wants to go heads-up racing. You just have to know where and how. If you haven't yet, give it a try. Win or lose, you'll have fun just being a part of the action. I'm Jim Camposano from Muscle Mustangs and Fast Fords magazines. Good luck, and we'll see you at the races.
It's much more fun knowing that I got to race Nitrous Pete. Right. And you know you're going there to race Nitrous Pete.
He wouldn't have thrashed in the pits like, you know, you just play, you don't put the effort into racing, bracket racing as much as you do.
I knew I was an underdog. I knew I had to do whatever I can to even come close. If I'm bracket racing, I ain't gonna bust my chops to go faster when I could just put a number on my window and say, that's how fast I'm gonna go. I know I gotta go faster than Pete, and I know I gotta do everything I can to do it.
And it was a close event.
A lot of the
Very close.
surprisingly enough, they were.
And you wouldn't, how would
That
you
was a
enjoyed it?
ride too, boy. That was real good.
You wouldn't have liked it. What happens if you went there?
I
Remember
don't
the years
do it.
we went to Maple
I don't
Grove?
ever like it.
We hated it.
I don't bracket race at all.
Oh, it's terrible.
No bracket race. Let's go. Ready?
Every pass you make when your head's up is you're trying to break another barrier. You know, you're trying to just plain trying to go faster.
One thing about our
Bracket
cars.
racing is just
Let me ask you
bored.
this.
So much, it's hard for me to get detail and not cut it up anymore because it's just a bore, and that describes it to us.
Bracket
It's a bore.
racer
You don't
has-
do it if it isn't fun. It is.
They have to beat on their car. I
At the
mean,
end
they
of the
put a
track.
lot of passes. Could you put 10 passes a day on your car? The bracket race? Would you want to? No, none of us would.
At the end of the track, when you win, you want to get out of the car and jump around.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, when you bracket race, what do?
Gotta go.
Go back.
Gotta go back in and run another time.
So what? You keep going, you keep going, you keep going, you keep going.
Yeah, you win once a day bracket racing, but you win every single pass heads up. Right, you get a thrill every pass.
I scream inside the car when I hear
Oh,
it.